the thread is throughout of wanting to affect people directly
Mhm.
and use my creativity, pedagogy, and my own mistakes to make it accessible and available to those who are ready to learn and those who are not there yet or who still feel a lot of shame, showing that there is a person that is going to tell you all the mistakes she made in her life and how she fixed them as a way to be like, there's another way. Whenever you're ready, there's another way to start looking at this. And what I realized throughout like my whole life in all of these situations is that there is no limit to our awareness level. And this is a little Hindu philosophy and Buddhist philosophy also. There is no limit to how much you can expand your awareness because I truly believe that. I mean, I've seen it in myself. Every day I'm learning so much and I'm changing. There's no limit to how we can improve ourselves. I also very strongly believe in constant self improvement. And that when you set the expectations of behavior really high, uh, people will meet them, and to not be afraid to set those expectations higher because we all deserve better. You know, when I first came out, my family had they were they were shocked. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then, but they were very shocked. And we joke about like when I was little, I made a toolbox for myself and I made business cards and
Oh,
I would go around the house
okay.
fixing things. And I was like, if that wasn't their first clue, but anyway, so they were very shocked. We still have the toolbox to this day. And there's still like change in there that I earned. But
Wow.
I had like a wrench and like socket wrench. I had all the tools. Anyway. So they were shocked and like we didn't speak for a while. And people would say to me, you just got to give them time. And I said to myself, why? What's there to think about? I'm still
Mhm.
me. And people would say, you've had your whole life to be queer. And I was like, not really. I mean, maybe I always knew there was something inside me, but like, this is all new to me too. But even if it weren't, like, why is that a justification for me to lower my expectations to the ground of how people should be treating me?
Mhm.
I don't respect that line of thinking. And no, my expectation is that you treat me properly, like like a human being.
Yeah.
And most people were just kind of like apologists for those who uh, weren't able to support and love right away. And I was like, well, that's unacceptable because I found myself comparing myself to things in society that aren't good. And I'm like, well, queerness has
Mhm.
nothing to do with good or bad. So why am I defending myself saying, well, at least I'm not that person who's like a terrible, at least I'm not a liar like that person. At least I didn't steal anything like that person. And it's like, wait a second. These are apples and oranges. This has nothing to do
Mhm.
with me.
Mhm.
And I'm not like, why am I comparing? There's nothing to compare. I'm just me and that's it. And I think the fact that I kept my expectations high, which I don't think they were high. I think it was just like being a normal person. But then people reach them. And had I lowered my expectations, I think my family's like bouncing back from this news would have taken much longer. So I
Mhm.
believe in setting high expectations for the behavior modification that you're looking for, because when you lower them, then people are like, well, I guess that's the high bar. No, say what the expectation is first and you wait for people to get there. And I think they get there faster. And that's what I try to do in my workshops too. It's not that people reach that expectation, but it is a demand I make up front. And I think it ought to be. You
Mhm.
all ought to be better. And, you reach your humility wherever it is, and then let's go forward. You don't need to have a lifelong dedication to activism. Start today, start anywhere. I bet if you start today, you can look back on your life and see all of the points in your life that brought you to this moment. But y- authentic activism starts at any point, and you don't need to be like, well, I've never really done this before. Start.
This is Social Justice Origin Stories. I'm your host, Rolando Tompkins-Jones.
Social Justice Origin Stories is a storytelling project that highlights personal stories and defining moments that have inspired individuals and organizations to labor for equity and social justice. Through truth telling, the honest sharing of their experiences, storytellers teach us about themselves, enabling us to learn about ourselves and our world through their stories. By reconnecting with pivotal moments of activation in their lives, they invite us to do the same. At Social Justice Origin Stories, we believe that there's power in storytelling and lived experience is experience. There's room enough for all of us to do this work. There are many ways to contribute, and our contributions don't need to be the same. We can enter and remain engaged in the work using the gifts that are special to us while supporting others and using theirs. We have the capacity to grow and change for the better when exposed to new information and experiences. We believe in our inherent worth and capabilities, and we possess the power to inspire and create change within ourselves and others. We can transcend the confines of the status quo to imagine and design more equitable and humanizing systems. So thank you all for being here and joining in, whether you're watching or listening to us. I'm really honored today to be joined by Pooja Kothari. It's one of those things, one of those reminders. We met through some of the things that I was sharing online, through my other project, Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian, and this project here, Social Justice Origin Stories. It's just another one of those reminders that, is share your stories, tell your stories, put your work out into the world, your art, your creativity, and your message will resonate with the people that it resonates with, and who knows the sorts of connections that can come as a part of that. I'm really honored to have Puja here to share a little bit about her own social justice origin story, as well as the founding, the principles, the ideas behind her company Boundless Awareness as well. So yes, really happy to have you here. But it's just one of those things. If you have an idea, if you have something that you want to say and put out into the world, the things that are important to you are
Mm.
also important to others. And who knows who you might connect with just by being yourself and sharing your story and putting the things out that are important to you. And so I hope you all take that affirmation and find more affirmations as we continue to talk today. So thank you so much, Pooja, for being here. And again, like it's a reminder, there are people all over the world, all over the country, where we are locally, nationally, globally, who are dedicated to equity and justice work. And yeah, just share, just be yourself, share your stories, put your narratives out into the world. And that's a way to find connections with folks who will be in solidarity with you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's true, I found your work about 8 years ago when I was starting Boundless Awareness. I knew my ideas, I knew my positions, was excited to start my company and start teaching, but I was like, who else is out there? It was just a simple Google search, and I found you immediately. I was like,
Mm,
oh, there's other people who think like I do. And just the way you wrote your notes as a aspiring humanitarian, I was like, the humility, the poise, the authenticity. And then I didn't have the courage to reach out to you for another 7 years. And then I was like, come on, you admire what this person puts out there, just reach out. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I wish I reached out sooner, but I'm so happy I did. And I'm so happy we're here.
Thank you. And as am I, tremendously honored and happy that you're here.
Yeah, so my name is Pooja Kothari. I am a former public defender with the Legal Aid Society, criminal defense practice in Brooklyn. Right after law school, I got my dream job to work there. And I grew so much there. I had my mentors, Michael Letwin, Azalia, Torres, were crucial in my development and my activism in developing courage to continue to speak out and crossing boundaries of where I thought I ought to stop. And they pushed me to continue speaking out and speaking up. And I spent about 7 years there. And then I started Boundless Awareness, which is a company that I own and that I founded. And we develop anti oppression curriculum, anti bias curriculum, and then we facilitate it all over the country, sometimes to other countries too, virtually. So I work with companies and nonprofits and universities. But the activism really started as a pretty young kid. And I think it was the way I grew up. It was what my parents instilled in me about equality and always critiquing what I saw on the outside and, inside the house, outside the house, and just like having a really, really critical eye of how things can be improved, but really not finding my community and like-minded people until much later in life.
There's a quote that I use with guests. It's from Corey Bush. And she says, many of us do not choose to become activists. Instead, we are activated. So when you think about the things that contributed to your own social justice origin story, what were some of those moments, those memories, those experiences that activated you?
You know how kids are always like, but why? Why? And they go through that stage where they're asking why over questions that have no answers. It's like that stage never ended. I think for people like us, like we're always asking, but why? And what is the reason behind that? And does that make sense? And is that equitable? And that stage, once it started, it never ended for me. And
Mm.
I had two parents that really fostered my critique of everything around me and forced me to really think about, okay, so why is it that way? They never gave me like easy answers, and they really forced me to have my own critical thinking. And I think that was one of many great gifts that they gave me to develop my mind. And I think inadvertently they made me an activist. I don't think they were planning on doing that. But one of like the one strong memory I have is, so I'm Indian. My parents are from India. We're Hindu, and there's a monthly puja, is what we call it, monthly prayer that we do, and we get together with a few other families and do this monthly puja with them as a group. And after the prayers are done, you eat together, and then you kind of hang out. So during this hanging out period, the women go into the kitchen, the men go into the living room, and it is like it's like everybody goes to their own pole,
Mhm.
and the children kind of run around if they want to. But if I wasn't running around with the other kids or wasn't interested, my dad would be like, "Pooja, come here." And he would make me sit with him. And ultimately I would start wandering in on my own. The seat was always available for me to sit down and just listen.
Mm.
And the uncles would just talk about politics and the economy and all sorts of things that I couldn't understand at 9 years old, and continuing on into my teenage years. I started understanding a little bit more, started hearing arguments. I would talk to my parents on the ride home about, okay, so what did you think about that? And this like critical thinking of like, and I don't know how to. Indian culture is really bifurcated on gender. It's
Mm.
this imaginary bifurcation that, I mean, the whole world is like that, I suppose. But since I grew up in that, it's like
Yeah.
very just unconscious. Just like the women, it just never mixes. And I would wander into the kitchen and hear what the aunties were talking about. And I'm like, this is so boring. Like, I don't want to talk about clothes or food or jewelries and who's wearing what. And like, I can't believe like poor mom is stuck here, like having to listen to this when the
Mm.
uncles are having such interesting conversations. And so it was that like, wait, why is
Yeah.
this even happening in my own family? My dad's inviting me here. How come my mom also isn't sitting here? Is it because she's not interested? What is she interested in? And I have an older sister, where was she and like what was she interested in? So that like my dad kind of like bringing me in and making me sit and listen happened at puja monthly pujas. It happened when we went to India, where it's like, this in my parents' families, it's, really traditional. And so it's even more stark. There's no commingling, but my dad would always say, Puja, you come with me. And I would sit with his
Mm.
brothers and listen to those conversations in Hindi and take part in those debates or whatever they had. And I never felt like it was like, I always saw that I was the only one doing that. But my dad made it so normal for me to join him and almost like, if I didn't want to, I didn't have to, but it was like a
Yeah.
really nice, like, you're my pal and you're sitting here and you're going to listen. And I'm not going to relegate you to like, to be with women or the kids when you can learn so much more with uncles. And all of that
Yeah.
misogyny and patriarchy is so messed up and
Yeah.
obviously was being reinforced right in front of me. And then on the flip side, I had like this special in because of my dad, and everyone like listened to him and he was like, no one would ever tell my dad, like, oh, don't bring your child. Like, if that was his decision, that's what he was doing. And there was just no discussion about it.
They
So,
wouldn't challenge him.
yeah, they never challenged him. So it was like I was like an appendage of his. But yeah, so it was like kind of meta, you're in it and you're hearing like, oh, I'm getting all this information. And then you're like, but wait, this is also really unfair. And now I'm part of
Yeah.
this like weird dynamic, gendered dynamic that's happening. That doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, really meta. Criticizing my dad and criticizing his perpetuating of this gendered dynamic, but while also being grateful that I could be part of it.
What was it for you about that, being able to listen in on those discussions, that was so impactful and formulative for your understanding around your social justice origin story?
And like it was before I was 10, I think. Like age at 8, 9, 10, where you don't really have awareness of the world. You're really self-interested still, like what I need, what I want. And you're still a
Yeah,
kid. And then
yeah,
like being able to see like, oh, there's so much outside of my understanding. They're using words that I have no understanding of. I couldn't read a newspaper and understand what the newspaper was saying. But here I had this audio version of these debates going on about politics and the economy and the president and
yeah,
who was doing what. And I'm like, oh, there's so much more I don't get. And becoming interested in topics that I probably would have been like, that's boring, like the economy, who wants to think, but like now that I was immersed, I had a stake in it. And I think that has carried throughout. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things I don't understand. And let's dive into it and see what I can learn here. That is the effect that it had on my social justice origin story. Like, be inquisitive, be curious, and
yeah.
criticize or have a critical eye towards everything.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, and I imagine that it carried through to your other experiences too. And then you also talked about becoming more interested in equity and justice and doing human rights work even when you went to college.
Yeah, I mean, we often talked at home. I talked a lot with my dad growing up about the injustices that I saw and unfairness. And I think he probably saw that as like, oh, a lot of kids, like once their eyes open to the world, are like, it's but this is so
Mhm.
unfair. How could they do that? How could the government make that decision? So it started at home. And both my parents are doctors and are really like
Yeah.
really into their work. They really cared about their patients. I would come home and listen to these heartbreaking stories of my mom diagnosing cancer. I mean, on
Mm.
a daily basis with, her patients. She is still practicing radiologist and focusing on women's health. And like, I would hear her how she talked about these just terrible cases, or my dad would come home and talk about his cases. And so I got that like that grassroots desire to help from them because it
Yes.
felt like even though they had very sad days at times, they were so dedicated to the people that they served and they saw the effect immediately. And so grassroots work always was my calling, so to speak, not policy or like these high level
Mhm.
things. It's like, I'm not that interested in that work. I really want to see like the one-to-one direct thing. But I didn't understand that that would translate into like becoming a public defender or doing human rights work in that way. I had no idea
Yeah.
what it would turn out to be. So I just got involved in student government in college. I went to Union College, which is a small private liberal arts school in Schenectady, New York. And it was like the perfect, situation. It was a small group. I was really able to flourish. Was president of my class my first year. I was always in student
Let's
government and thinking
go.
about
Let's go.
I really got into multicultural affairs, which was the name of the position back then. I'm not sure what they call it now, but it was really like the inclusion position of how to increase inclusion on campus. And so it was like working with multiple groups and seeing just like what other groups are having difficulties in getting money to organize stuff. And it was right after college that I took a master's in international relations. And that was like, okay, with this master's, then I can do the humanitarian work that I meant to do. But through that degree, I realized it was a lot more policy that I really did not care for. So
Okay.
that's why I ended up going to law school and then becoming a public defender. which I probably could have gone directly that way, but I had no idea how to use the skills that I had built in the real world.
Mhm. Yep, and that's all right. Sometimes we have to have these other experiences that can show us whatever our pathway or our next pathway is. I wanted to ask you, did you at any point or had you ever had the opportunity to ask your father around like, "Hey, why did what was it about bringing me in and having me listen in?" Did you ever have a chance to ask about that in any way?
I no, I should.
Okay, okay, okay.
I should ask him. I mean, he always said at home, like, and maybe it's because he had 2 girls, and he was just like, "This is just how." Maybe being a girl had nothing to do with it, but he just wanted to give as much power and knowledge to us as possible.
Mm,
So, sports was very important, leadership was really important, and knowledge was really important to him. But not in the way of like, "You better get good grades." It wasn't anything like that. It was like, "You have to understand. Grades, whatever, but you have to
yeah,
understand what you're talking about, and, like, make sure you have that foundation of knowledge." And for me, that, like, for some whatever personality I was born with, that really resonated with me, and I wanted to be like that. I wanted to
yeah.
fulfill that expectation.
And you talked about working in legal aid, wanting to do human rights work, humanitarian work, and getting that drive, that want, that desire for that one-to-one connection, that grassroots, working with people from watching your parents. And so, yeah, I can see in your storytelling and in hearing in your storytelling how that theme is carrying through. You also mentioned here that you've always felt different where you grew up. Could you share a little bit
Well,
more about that?
yeah. It's funny being the first generation born here. Hmm. Struggled a lot with my identity. When you go to India, we went to India at least every 2 years growing up. And, when you go to India, my cousins would be like, "You're not Indian." And then I'd be
Mm,
in school and they'd be like, "You're not American." And this is a
mhm.
very classic dynamic and struggle that a lot of people have had all over the world, of course. And, I didn't uh, realize how much more different I was than just this ethnic identity until after college or maybe sometime in college. But being queer, that always was there in my being, but I couldn't articulate like there was just no words like we have now that is like I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that like our culture has developed this new language and new vocabulary that we can all use. But back then I was like, I just know I'm different. I definitely don't fit in. My thoughts are different. The way I express myself is different. Sometimes I feel like being my authentic self leaves me so much more vulnerable than it does other people, and I don't understand why. So there was a lot of like hiding um, who I was, and on multiple levels. So like uh, even I remember in ninth grade, my earth science partner um, m- was talking to his friend in class, and Um, he was like, "Yeah, I called Pooja's house yesterday and her dad picked up." And then he imitated my dad's voice. And I was
Mm.
like, I was in ninth grade, like 15, 14, I don't know. And I was like, that's not how my dad sounds. And it was the first time that I had heard someone like imitate my dad's voice. And I was like devastated because
Yeah, yeah,
it was the first time I saw that people really look down on my family. And it was not personal. Okay, like, when you're in ninth grade, you think it's personal. Obviously, looking back,
yeah, 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 yeah.
it had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with my dad, but, like, it felt so personal, and I was like, "That is not how we sound." And other people coming over to my house and being like, "Your house smells weird." And it's like, "This is how? This is just how the house, like,
Yeah,
what
it's just
smell?"
my house.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then I was like, "It what?" Okay, if, my mom had lit incense, I'm like, "Yeah, it smells amazing," like, "What are you talking about?" She had just cooked, it's like but I didn't recognize so many things that other people were like, you know, "What is that about?" So there's like this weird internalized, when you live in such a predominantly white society, and all of them are telling you like, that's different, that's weird, that doesn't sound right, that you are not as smart because your voice sounds different, the way you pronounce things is different. It's like you
Hmm.
internalize that shame. So I grew up with not only like the language and the food and the sounds, or even listening to Indian music, which I love. It's like the main thing I listen to, and even like especially now, but back then I
Yeah.
loved Indian music. And just, seeing people look down on it, you internalize that shame. And then, if people are going to just make fun of you or isolate you because of these very visible things, then why delve into your queerness at all? Oh my God, what a lesson you learned so early on, that you cannot be your authentic self.
Yeah.
That kind of followed through, even though in college I flourished in this professional or student professional aspect, I still hid a lot of my identity there because it just was not a safe place. It was actually pretty much the same as I grew up. Like that, the community in college was really what it was, a predominantly white institution, and really hard to think openly back then.
I appreciate you sharing your story here, as I also feel like there are other folks out there who are listening who may have either they may actively be in this experience of receiving all this messaging and internalizing it in that way, or there may be folks who can relate to it in different ways. And that's one of the things I really want to explore through this project too, is what's our relationship with resisting that internalized oppression, just to normalize the fact that those messages that say we are inferior in different ways, they are untrue. Just acknowledging that if we're inundated with these things, we get these messages in different ways and from different angles day in and day out. It's hard not to internalize some of that. So for folks who are out there listening, it's an outcome of a design process that was intended to send that message. And we're also exploring, thinking about, wondering about what's our journeys of resistance to that. And that would be one of my questions for you. Who or what are some of the experiences that might you consider, maybe even after some years of experience and thinking back, see as like an intervention or a counterpoint to some of that messaging? So what kind of helped you to navigate and realize in some ways, hey, I'm being lied to about this. It's nothing wrong with me, nothing wrong with my family, my culture. Who were some of the people or experiences that serve to remind you of that? And then what's your relationship with resisting that internalization today?
That's such a great question. Of course, it's finding people who are like you and who really like themselves. And I had many people throughout my life who were Indian and loved being Indian. I mean, they resisted those feelings themselves. And like being around other first generation Indian people, kids, my age was very helpful. And at the same time, it's in a really homophobic community. So it's
Yeah.
like, and it's, as I had mentioned, a very sexist, misogynist, patriarchal society.
Yeah.
And that all gets internalized also. So there were, and you can't just peel those layers off of each other. The Indianness and the queerness are just stuck. So it's not like there's added safety because I'm with a group of other Indian kids who like themselves, because
Right.
you can't be your true self around them. And then there was this also weird idea that queerness was a white thing, or it's a thing that white people do.
Hmm.
Indian people are not queer like that. You're too Americanized. Or yeah, only white people can do that. Or
Hmm.
or go through that quote unquote phase. And Indian people, we have no room for that, because you got to just follow this, the path of being this fulfilling the model minority myth.
Yeah.
You'd get validation for your ethnicity and language and food and all your culture. But then as I grew into my queerness, I was like, wait, you people are not safe to be around. And now that I'm more fortified in my own I ethnicity and ethnic identity, I hate the word ethnic, but I'm wondering how to say it. In my own brownness, I suppose,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
I'm now seeking, fortification in the queerness space. And if you go into like women's spaces, it's still very sexist. So like I'm like, who is like thinking outside this like box here?
Yeah.
And how can I find them?
Trying to find that community. Yeah. Because
Right.
you're right. You can't just, peel them back as if they're sort of individual things. They're woven into each other. And yeah,
Yeah.
finding that community. Who are those folks out there?
Yeah. And that really came with like meeting people in college who were international students that came in who had all sorts of ideas, some misogynist, some homophobic, a lot of them much more open and like being out, like breaking that bubble of, you know, what my college experience had been and finding a lot of international perspectives. I was like, oh, you can find people that like maybe they're cis, straight, and white, but they somehow get it and like have these
Mhm.
like open ideas of that like life is dynamic and identity it can be dynamic too and like fall wherever you fall and there's no shame in it and that
Yep.
that experience was the start of building up the resistance and being able to not get sucked into like internalizing the shame over and over again. It started to break that cycle and gave me a lot of hope. Then building my own resilience towards being challenged by others of like, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, or you're queer, that's weird, or you don't look gay, or you don't look queer, or you're too pretty to be a lesbian, or all sorts of things. It also accurately describe me like, it fluctuates. And being able to see through those comments and again, depersonalize everything. That is the key. It's never really about the person being bullied. It has nothing to do with us. It's has
Mhm.
everything to do with we are fine.
Mhm.
We're fine. As long as, just, we're fine. We're not doing anything wrong here.
Yeah.
Let's live. And that resilience will just keep you sane because there will always be people to say things against how you're not like the rest.
There's another friend of mine, like a guest in another storytelling piece for social justice origin stories, and talked about depersonalizing, particularly as it relates to resisting internalized oppression. She's into coaching, mostly women of color. And as a part of that depersonalization, she would ask our clients the question, how much of whatever is happening and what's hearing with this experience that you're telling me about, we're going through, we're navigating, how much of it is mine to hold and how much of it is representative of a larger systemic thing that is at play here, and as a way to support folks in depersonalizing these
Yeah.
narratives, these messages. There's some myths that have been made up about, my group and my history and my culture and that, but it's not something that is wrong with me. It's representative of problems for sure that need to be solved, but I am not in and of myself a problem, for existing and being myself. It's like it's these larger things. So I
Yeah.
appreciated you mentioning the depersonalization piece of it.
Yeah. Right. And once you build up the resilience to kind of like block all of the challenges about you and your identity, I think that's what built up my resilience to then start questioning myself and to start taking responsibility for the thought racist, classist, misogynist ways I upheld oppression, perpetuated oppressive behavior, oppressive language. And that resilience helps you just quickly move through the shame of it. Now I feel
Mhm.
like I'm at a point where I don't even feel shame. I'm just like, oh, don't do that. Don't say that. And I'll just automatically correct myself now. I said
Mhm.
this word, gosh, I can't remember, but it was a word I don't want to use. It may have been crazy. That may have been the word that I was using.
Mhm.
And I said
Mhm.
that. And I was like, that's not the word I want to say. The word I want to say, I want to be more accurate here. The word I want to say, and I just talked my way through it. I'm still in the
Yeah.
conversation with the person. It was a client, and I'm still talking to them, but I'm mirroring to them how you can change your words without being like, oh, I didn't mean to say that word. That's like really, I'm really trying to like, okay, let's just move
Mhm.
through it. What's the word? What
Mhm.
do I actually feel like saying here? And so the resilience that being able to
Yeah.
just hold like, "That's messed up. How can I do better next time?" is so much faster and easier, and it makes life a lot better to not have the shame around it.
Yeah, and I love that. Like you're modeling it in real time to other people what that means. And from what I got, what you were saying too, is like how can you, respond in a way where it's a noticing, you're self-correcting, and you're not from a place of privilege, making it about yourself in a way that sometimes can happen. Like I don't, you tell me if you had these similar experiences, but
Right.
like
Yes.
person with privilege says or done something, and then it's like, oh, whoa, 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 and the apology then becomes, or talking about it then
Yeah.
becomes or puts the pressure on the other person to say, like, to remind them or to reassure them, like, "Oh, I know you're a good person," or "I know you're trying," or "I know," and it becomes about them as opposed to like, "Oh, okay, yes, I am noticing this socialization is coming up again, or these the way I've internalized." Because I appreciate that example too, because just personally, recognizing the ways that ableism has impacted my worldview and things is something that I'm continually looking on as well. So it's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to use this word. What am I actually trying to say here? You know, as a way of just modeling and noticing that without making it about you in ways that aren't about modifying your behavior, but about like, oh wow, I appreciate the way you described how you did that, and not only how you did
Yeah.
that, but that you model that in real time when you can. So yeah, thanks for sharing that example.
People may not realize that I'm modeling for them, but
Mhm.
maybe it'll subconsciously get in there. Or
Absolutely.
something my wife and I often say to each other, like right before or after the election, especially right before, like you can walk down the street and you can feel the anxiety and everywhere all over the country, I imagine. And or like there's just a little bit more road rage that you notice, or there's really heavy honking, and you're like, so one person might say, "Oh my God, people are so crazy these days."
Mhm.
And one thing that we both say is people are going through a lot these days. And it just totally shifts the way you think about people. It humanizes them. It reminds you that, like, sometimes I go through a lot and I also feel like this intense anxiety that I probably am emanating while I'm walking down the street as well,
Mhm.
or my fidgeting in line, or your anxiety shows up in all sorts of ways of how you speak to people. And when you remember, yeah, people are going through a lot these days, or especially when, COVID happened. And right at
Yeah.
the beginning of lockdown, it's like, yeah, people are really struggling. And when you can just phrase it like that, and it's one, so much more accurate, and two, so much more in our humanity, and
Mhm.
not like crazy is this thing that I don't have to deal with. And it's not my responsibility, and it's somebody else's. And let's like just move that closer to the margins of our society, put them all on an
Mhm.
island and cut, cut them
Mhm.
away. That's maybe literally not how people think, but when you use these placeholders, that's
Yeah.
where your mind goes. That I am now divorced from them, and they're not my responsibility anymore.
Mhm. It's saying it in a way that says, "Oh, yeah, this thing or these folks are separate from me in some way." But then when you turn around and say, "Well, no, I go through a lot too." It's a way of like you're not distancing yourself from it. It's like, I am also a part of this in different ways and it shows up.
Yeah.
Love that framing and phrasing too, because you're right. Like anxiety, it shows up in a lot of different ways. Frustration, like you say, the way we talk to people, if we're short with others and different things, like it shows up in a lot of ways. And so, thinking about what's happening as a way of like, yeah, I I I feel these things too, in my own way. That sense of connection stays there. It's like you're not talking about it as if you're somehow separate from what's happening.
Yeah.
Separate, and then I think sometimes the unsaid thing is, like, separate and somehow also, like, better or above what's happening,
Totally.
as well, so I appreciate that.
Mm.
And so those experiences were some of the building blocks from you. So you have folks in college, legal aid who, educated you on Palestine, and you can see the links or clear links between freedom in the US and freedom in Palestine. And I'm thinking of your early experiences. I'm talking about just watching your parents and getting that desire to work with folks at the grassroots level with them, and then even how you shared, in some ways, you're self-correcting and you're being really thoughtful around just how you're engaging with folks around your relationship with privilege and that too, important experiences. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think you said in here too, you were noticing some things in the courtroom too that you, in terms of just internalizing some of the systemic things, like how you were seeing clients come through there and
Yeah.
changing your thought patterns and behaviors.
Yes, of course. I mean, you go through law school, and law school is so, unless you take a clinic or an externship or internship, law school is so just book heavy, and you don't meet real life things until you take the opportunity to do so. And you can very well not take that opportunity. So you could just like learn the books, which is not real life. And, getting to legal aid after law school, even though I had internships at public defender offices and saw what it's like to interview a client or, how to speak to a client, how to write a directive, you do all of these practical things, but they're isolated, they're like a one-off thing. But then you represent the whole client and you're like, it's a totally different experience. And all of the, oppression that happens intellectually in our criminal system. But when you get into the criminal courthouse and you walk in and you see it's only one skin color represented in the audience, you're like, I remember walking in, it was like, one of my first days walking in, and I remember looking around and being like, Puja, never get used to this. And then you're there for 7 years and you're like, of course you're used to it. So I am not immune. You get the same messaging every single day of who deserves police contact, which is so traumatizing, but you get used to the fact that it's a traumatizing space and you're like, whatever, everybody goes through trauma. Well, that's not true.
Not true in that way.
Not this horrific way of like the worst day of your life. And then you have to relive, certain parts of that day every time you come back to court. And there's just constant surveillance and like skepticism towards you. And, being a client in that space is just a horrible, there is nothing satisfying, even about an acquittal. And I know it's like, okay, you got acquitted. Like that's amazing. Yeah. But like in the meantime, your life was destroyed. Your job, you got fired from your city job because you had police contact. And, you're brutalized by the system. You were traumatized the day you were, and who knows what happened at the precinct or on the way to the precinct. I mean, it's just horrible. You could lose your children. I mean, your housing. Even when there's an acquittal, there's no real good day. So, the damage has been done. So anyway, as a budding lawyer, you walk in and I tell myself, Puja, do not get used to this scene. This is not normal. This is not how our world works. I mean, this is exactly how our world works, but this is not actually who commits crimes and who should be arrested. So do not get used to seeing this population. But after 7 years, of course, get used to it. And when you internalize it, and because the only way to cope with such a traumatizing system is to tell yourself that it's okay. If you keep telling yourself it's not okay, like you burn out really fast, right? You don't want to burn out because you want to do good work and represent people well. But how are you representing people well if you've internalized a racism that's like, oh yeah, another person of color in front of me, or another undocumented person in front of me, or whatever it might be. Or you start classifying people based on the tendency of who is arrested for which crime. And then you yourself start applying that bias. Oh, well, this must be a DWI. Oh, is it this type of person? It must be a robbery. Or is this type of person? It must be domestic violence. You yourself start categorizing it. Yeah, this is normal. These types of people do these crimes, these types of people. And it's like, no, these are the types of human beings that police want to capture. And that's the only thing that you've learned. But there's no other extra data you're getting of like siloing people into these boxes. But our brain does those things. And when you don't catch it, it affects the way you can represent people. And you're not going to ask the right questions. You're going to presume you already know the answer to things. You're going to presume that there's no other witnesses that would be worth talking to. It's going to affect how you investigate your cases. And it's going to affect how ultimately, if you ever go to trial, or even if you don't go to trial, but you're negotiating with the prosecutor, it's going to affect your negotiations too, because people can read if you really believe in your client or not. And you need to believe in 100% of your clients. There's no like, oh, only if they're innocent. That's not a thing. It's everybody, because everybody has had, the police invading their life. So, I spent the first few years at Legal Aid using the resilience of growing up and being challenged and, people poking at me to start poking at my own stuff and say, like, you said you weren't going to get used to this, and now you are. You're coming home upset, you're having anxiety, you have nightmares, you keep thinking about clients, and this is consuming you. So let's be better at it. We
Yeah.
might still have the
Yeah.
anxiety and still have the nightmares, but if we're not going to get better at our job, then what's the point in being here? So that's when I started really thinking, why did I ask my client this question? What questions haven't I asked? Okay, these are all the standard questions you're supposed to ask on a charge of robbery or whatever. But what questions haven't I asked? Okay, let me ask about their family. Let me ask about their family members. Let me ask if there was anybody, maybe they're not thinking of someone who could have seen what happened. Let me ask it in a different way. Sometimes trick that a lot of public defenders use is they ask their clients, all right, tell me what happened, but pretend like you're narrating a movie scene by scene. So set the stage for me. Like, where are we? Who's there? What's the lighting like? Was it cold outside? Dark, and that
Mm-hmm.
gets so much more because then you're like, they know, everybody knows what a movie is. So they can just narrate a little bit more comprehensively instead of being like, all right, blah, blah, blah. Okay, tell me what actually happened. And they're like,
Yeah.
that's not how it went down. Okay, well then how did it go? Okay. Well, then you're suddenly in here and you're not understanding what they're saying. And it's like building that connection that everybody wants. Everybody,
Yeah.
one, needs to like not be in jail and needs to get out. That's first and foremost. But your negotiation with the prosecutor, your presentation to the judge, and your own investigation hinge on those first 10 to 25 minutes with your client.
Mm.
And if you can build the right relationship, you can do amazing work. But if you're not going to ask the right questions, or you're going to presume because of my own racist tendencies, then you're not building a relationship, and then your client was not going to trust you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, it was very helpful to have people to continue. And one of them is my wife now. At the time, this is like 15 years ago. We were um, not married then, but or even like 12 years ago. Like she would challenge me, being like, that's that's not that's a very interesting way to say what you
Mm-hmm.
want to say. And I'd be like, what the hell? Like what? What are you talking about? And just getting those pings or that tap on the shoulder, like, try again. Can you think
Mm-hmm.
about that differently? Can you say that differently? And that's the language we use still today. And we have 2 kids and we use it with our kids too. Any way you could say that differently to me?
Yeah, is there another way? I mean, I think about that because you talked about internalizing the racism and the racist ideas, and you told yourself not to get used to it, but you did at different points. And I do think sometimes we need those experiences, those people in life where our thought processes, our actions are supporting a dominant narrative going in one direction. And we need those folks to say, like, oh, wait a minute. Have you thought about, to offer something counter, something that to help us pause and be aware that we're in this thought process, this pretty regimented, tracked thought process. And wait a minute, there's another way, there's another way to think about this. And then also with your questioning around describe it to me like it was in a movie, and,
Yeah.
scene by scenes, building those connections, but then also getting that critical information that ensures a better chance of being understood, your circumstances being understood and being able to advocate in a clearer way, a more understanding, a comprehensive way, having more of the details that you need. So
Yeah.
I'm listening to all these experiences that you've had, and I'm wondering also how did those experiences or how do they inform the creation, the formation of boundless awareness? So how did those, your childhood, your time in college, your time working in legal aid, all of your experiences, how did and how do those experiences inform the creation of boundless awareness? So I asked you before when we were talking about this, like, tell us about the name and what went into
Yeah.
that and sort of
Yeah.
the philosophy behind it. But tell us a little bit about boundless awareness and how your experiences are connected to creating that.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, the thread is throughout of wanting to affect people directly
Mhm.
and use my creativity, pedagogy, and my own mistakes to make it accessible and available to those who are ready to learn and those who are not there yet or who still feel a lot of shame, showing that there is a person that is going to tell you all the mistakes she made in her life and how she fixed them as a way to be like, there's another way. Whenever you're ready, there's another way to start looking at this. And what I realized throughout like my whole life in all of these situations is that There is no limit to our awareness level. And this is a little Hindu philosophy and Buddhist philosophy also. There is no limit to how much you can expand your awareness. And I thought I want that in the name of my company because I truly believe that. I mean, I've seen it in myself. Every day I'm learning so much and I'm changing. There's no limit to how we can improve ourselves. I also very strongly believe in constant self improvement. And I also believe that when you set the expectations of behavior really high, uh, people will meet them. And to not be afraid to set those expectations higher because we all deserve better. When I first came out, my family had they were they were shocked. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. But they were very shocked. And we joke about like when I was little, I made a toolbox for myself and I made business cards and
Oh,
I would go around the house
okay.
fixing things. And I was like, if that wasn't their first clue, but anyway. So they were very shocked. We still have the toolbox to this day. And there's still like change in there that I
Wow.
earned. But I had like a wrench and like socket wrench. I had all the tools. Anyway. So they were shocked and like we didn't speak for a while. And people would say to me, you just got to give them time. And I said to myself, why? What's there to think about? I'm still
Mhm.
me. And people would say, you've had your whole life to be queer. And I was like, not really. I mean, maybe I always knew there was something inside me, but like, this is all new to me too. But even if it weren't, like, why is that a justification for me to lower my expectations to the ground of how people should be treating me?
Mhm.
I don't respect that line of thinking. And no, my expectation is that you treat me properly, like a human being.
Yeah.
And most people were just kind of like apologists for those who uh, weren't able to support and love right away. And I was like, well, that's unacceptable because I found myself comparing myself to things in society that aren't good. And I'm like, well, queerness has
Mhm.
nothing to do with good or bad. So why am I defending myself saying, well, at least I'm not that person who's like a terrible, at least I'm not a liar like that person. At least I didn't steal anything like that person. And it's like, wait a second. These are apples and oranges. This has nothing to do
Mhm.
with me.
Mhm.
And I'm not like, why am I comparing? There's nothing to compare. I'm just me and that's it. And I think the fact that I kept my expectations high, which I don't think they were high. I think it was just like being a normal person. But then people reach them. And had I lowered my expectations, I think my family's like bouncing back from this news would have taken much longer. So I
Mhm.
believe in setting high expectations for the behavior modification that you're looking for, because when you lower them, then people are like, well, I guess that's the high bar. No, say what the expectation is first and you wait for people to get there. And I think they get there faster. And that's what I try to do in my workshops too. It's not that people reach that expectation, but it is a demand I make up front. And I think it ought to be. You
Mhm.
all ought to be better. And, reach your humility wherever it is, and then let's go forward.
All right. So, a belief and a recognition that there are no limits to our awareness, the importance of setting those expectations and believing that people will reach them. What are some other values that you bring into your work with Boundless Awareness? And then, how do you ensure that you stay true to those values in the work?
The values that, aside from those that I bring in, are compassion for others, integrity, that I'm doing what I'm asking others to do, and honesty. So there's no BS. It's kind. It's always kind,
It's
but
kind.
it's direct and honest. And the way I make sure I do that is in how I treat the people that work for me and work with me. So, and it's nice to be on this side because you get to go into clients' workplaces and tell them at the beginning of the formation, like of when your firm was just a little germ of idea, how were you thinking about equity? And a lot of
Mhm.
people are like, well, that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was like capitalizing the business, getting our own clients so that we could be successful, being able to pay my employees. So obviously all of those like foundations. So, if I'm telling my clients like equity has to be the first thing that you're thinking of. So now that you didn't, let's figure out like how to integrate it now. Then I have to be starting Boundless Awareness with the integrity, with the idea of executing equity at every step. So it's how I treat the people that work for me. And it probably is why we remain quite small. One, because it's easier to have that effect on a smaller group of people. But it's also, we live in a capitalist society. This is a business, but I'm really not into capitalism. So it's a lot easier for me. I think when you're really into capitalism, there's no paradigm to think about equity in a capitalist society.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there an experience, a memory, a time when you realized or were reminded, like, you know what, this is why I do this every day. Like, this is why I'm doing this. Any experience that you have, memories, noticings that put you in that place?
As you know, when you have kids, the focus and the intensity of things completely shifts to something much more important than what you thought was important in your life. And I think when I make my wife laugh, it's like one of the highlights of my day. And I continue to go back to it over and over in my head. And when I make my kids laugh, like really authentically laugh, those are the moments that I'm like, this is it. Like I made them smile.
This is it.
Yeah, that's it. That's all. Thinking about those things right now in this moment is like, I have a surge of happiness. And
Oh, that's
right
great.
before when you were asking that question, and I was thinking in boundless awareness terms, yeah, I had a great retreat a few weeks ago. I had a great continuing legal education course I gave a few months ago where people were so in it to win it. Like we could have gone for another few hours. And that's very pleasing. But the satisfaction and the giddiness and the happiness comes from those three other people, my wife and two kids. When they laugh, it's like, this is why I'm in it.
Mhm.
The work can't bring me to that high or low. It just is what it is. I think if I didn't have kids and if I weren't married, then my happiness would hinge on the success or failures of my business. But yeah, the priorities
Yeah.
change in
Yeah.
a very helpful way, an important way,
Yeah.
how it should be.
So that question is sort of like what keeps you coming back? What are those memories or those things that just show you like, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing it? Another part to this question is what keeps you up at night in terms of just things connected to the work? It could be like, oh yeah, the field really needs this. We really need to go in this direction. It could be a question that you've been wanting an answer to or concerns, but like what are some of the things that keep you up at night? And again, that's literally or figuratively.
Yeah. Okay. There's
Um,
this one idea that I've been batting around, and I don't know how to phrase it and articulate it in a nice, eloquent way.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this
yeah.
probably is a good time to bat this idea around. Okay. So you know how whenever there's like, okay, Serena Williams wins something or like won something, she retired,
Mm,
or Venus wins something, and people say, oh, she's inspiration to girls everywhere. And that has always really pissed me off. Okay,
mhm.
because, most boys and men can never possibly achieve what either Williams sisters have, or like Christy Yamaguchi, anybody, you can take anybody,
Mhm,
any
mhm.
athlete. And to say that they only inspire girls is so weird to me. And I
Ah,
don't
mhm.
get it because we as girls and women are supposed to look at men and also be inspired by them. But like a boy is not allowed to say, I want to be like Serena Williams. Like, why wouldn't you want to be like Serena Williams?
Mhm.
If she survived childbirth twice and then went on to
Yeah,
win, like,
that's
how
right.
could you not want to be like her? We all want to be like her. So why is she an only inspiration to girls? And every time there's a woman who does something extraordinary, it's only girls who are allowed to be inspired. And I find that so insulting and weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
That keeps me up at night trying to formulate that in a way that I can explain that much more succinctly than I did now. And then also like describe all the misogynist obstacles that get in the way of us understanding why that's such a fucked up thing to say.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind when you're sharing your story is I'm thinking about all these book bannings and the removal or attempted removal of books and changing curriculum that reflects authors of color, that reflects experiences beyond the gender binary and other aspects of diversity. And there being lots of outrage and concern over like, what is this going to do to our it's like, this is good for, I think these stories, and even I would say also social justice origin stories, I feel a powerful venue for that too. Is like, these stories are, yes, for the folks who inhabit the different identities that folks have, speaking from their places of marginalization and resistance to that. Yeah, it's for them, but then it's for those of us who have some privilege as well to realize that the world is not just designed for us or all about us. It's about preparing the kids to meet a world that is truly representative of what is actually taking place and who actually lives here, as opposed to this homogenous world that is a white supremacist, patriarchal, heterosexist, cis, all the other things of that imagination where it's like only we are centered. It's like, no, these
Yeah.
stories exist for the folks from whom have these identities that are being centered in these moments in this storytelling. But then it's also important for folks who are used to being centered to realize and know that it's not all about you. The world's
Yeah.
not all about you. And you can also see some inspiration in that because, like you said, Venus or Serena winning anything, let's just be honest. Most men cannot compete on that level. As much as folks may want to say or do, and you cannot come in and compete on that level. And so, why not aspire to practice and do those sorts of things? Why can't you find some inspiration in that? And so, there's an interrogation of our imaginations, the ways we're socialized, the systems and things that needs to take place there. But that's one of the things that was coming up for me. It's like, yeah, why not? Why can't a boy take inspiration from that? And then also just thinking these stories, this sharing, yeah, it's for the folks who are resisting these systems to show, normalize, and model in some ways stories of resistance. But it's also to remind us from our places of privilege that really like the world is not all about you. It is not all about you. I'm just thinking of my own experiences too. Folks coming into some of the college courses I would teach, and I'm putting out these quotes from Abraham Lincoln or Lyndon B. Johnson or Thomas Jefferson, all these folks that are talked about as greats and heroes in society and things. And, having some quotes that actually, no, y'all were really about upholding some of these systems here.
Yeah.
So getting this pushback. So y'all are mad at me in the classroom. I wish y'all would have had these stories sooner. Then maybe you wouldn't have had this reaction that you're having, this resistance to recognizing, oh wait, the information that I've been given wasn't entirely correct, and information that explained things about me and my identity in ways that often paint us as the heroes of the story. Wait a minute, there's another perspective out there. And so, in terms of you sharing that as an idea that keeps you awake, it's one of the things that came to mind to me. It's like, yeah, it's for the people, but then also for those who aren't used to hearing these stories or have not heard these stories or aren't used to being decentered in experiences and conversations and in spaces, it's like, yeah, it's not all about us. It's not all about you, and you need to understand and know that too.
Yeah. It's a perfect parallel. Mm, absolutely. And, or like, another thing that's also related is when we talk about Black history, it's like, okay, this is like colonization history.
Hmm.
And this is like white history. And this is like, it's not just, it's just so fascinating to me, like that we label the worst atrocities that white people did as Black history. It's so strange. Of course, like, we read books, all of these banned books we
Hmm.
probably read at home. And, like, how can you not? We have several books about Shirley Chisholm. And there's a Shirley Chisholm Park here in Brooklyn because she was born in Brooklyn. And then there's the Chisholm Trail Parkway in Fort Worth, Texas, which is where we just were for Thanksgiving. And my family lives there. And we take it all the time. It's like a central highway. So, my kid is sick. So I turn around and I'm in the passenger seat. And I was like, hey, we're on the Chisholm Trail Parkway. Who's it named after? And, it's like, of course, my kids are Black, but still, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is not their history. It is like, I need to know it. Everybody needs to know it. This is like, she's such a powerful person that she's got this park, huge, beautiful, fantastic park in Brooklyn. And she's got this main highway in Texas, as she should have it named after her. So all of these parallels, we come together in so many homes, but it's not widespread enough for people to really realize, like, wait, that is the history of the land that I'm on, and therefore it's my history. So I need to know about it.
hmm And for me, in a way, it connects, and a little bit, for me, it's connecting back to some of what you were saying earlier about how even when those times that you check yourself, and what I got from it in terms of you're doing it in a way that does not talk about you as being separate from from the history or from what's happening. It's like, well, no, how am I connected to this too? And to bring that humanity back. And so, yeah, I love that this is sort of a time to kind of like talk about your idea and kind of like, throw it around and
Yeah.
see what comes up. But yeah, it's one of those things. Even in the sometimes the naming of the history, there can be this separation. It's like, oh, and then I think that could contribute to some of the pushback too. It's like, oh, this isn't what I need to know. This is something separate. But no, would you say like this is the land that I'm on, so this is also my history?
Yeah.
Really appreciated how you came through with that for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
That's the bite.
who or what are some of those influences, people, things, experiences that have inspired you or contributed to the formation of your worldview when it comes to doing your social justice work?
The real connection was, I learned, uh, let's see, I was in college in 99 to 2003. And I learned about Palestine in college, a lot about Palestine in college, but I didn't engage in that activism until I met Michael Letwin at Legal Aid and Azalia Torres, who were like my two big mentors who really, really influenced me. And Michael is an extraordinary in the face of like significant pushback and struggle. He is unwavering. And I learned so much from him about what courage is and doing it even though it's scary, and marching and protesting and just being visible and increasing your visibility even when, especially in the face of hostility. I mean, that's when you know you're making a difference. And he not only pushed me in that courage way, but he gave me so much education. We spent hours talking about history, and he is like an encyclopedia of knowledge, and he's so approachable. I'm just feel so lucky. Like Azalia would challenge me on being more active. Michael would educate me, and like we would go to protests together. And they were decades older than I was at that time. And I feel so lucky that I learned from them. It was an invaluable, indelible experience that led me to where I am today. And I'm very grateful to them.
Well, you kind of started saying it, but the second half of that question is, what would you say to them or about them in terms of just speaking to the gratitude of their contributions to your life and your worldview and how you do things? But yeah, if you do have any more to share in that
You
way, you
know,
can.
yeah. I mean, I feel like if only I can affect one person like they have affected me, that's a successful life. I mean, they have had. I think about them a lot, and I don't talk to them nearly as much as I think about them. But they have really formed, you know, pushing back on authority and and continued like what my dad taught me to question everything. Like really solidified that as an adult. And, as a public defender like that's where we all met at Legal Aid. You're always walking this fine line of like, how hard can I push back against authority? Judges,
Mhm.
DAs, cops, court officers, people who have guns generally. So how can I push back without hurting my client? And that's always the question. And these two have Michael and Azalia have very different ways of their approach, but they always challenge very respectfully, but they always push back. They always make their record. They
Mhm.
make sure their words are recorded by the court reporter. They make their record and they show up for their client. They don't bow down out of fear. They just say it. And I learned a lot about also tone from them because on the inside, you're feeling all this fury and
Mm.
rage of the injustice that you're witnessing and the whole charade of the courtroom. And they taught me how to say it in a tone that makes your record, that keeps your integrity, and especially the trust between your client and you. So your client hears what you're saying. They know you have their back, and you've made the legal record that protects everybody here. So here, I mean, in my imaginary courtroom that I'm in my mind, which is me, my client next to me, and the judge in front of me. So,
Yeah.
so they taught me so much on that, and I'm just so grateful. I hope they see this.
Oh, yeah, you can share it with them. I'll send it to you. You can share it with them if you want.
Yeah,
And for me, it's significant because I think it's important to, if there are folks we have affirmations for, when we get those opportunities, just to share it with them
yeah.
when they can hear the message. So thank you for doing that. What do you hope listeners will learn or take away from your story, and what actions would you encourage them to take?
I hope they take away that you don't need to have a lifelong dedication to activism. Start today, start anywhere. I bet if you start today, you can look back on your life and see all of the points in your life that brought you to this moment. But y- authentic activism starts at any point, and you don't need to be like, well, I've never really done this before. Start, do something,
Mm.
read something. And the thing I would suggest that people do is to read something that they agree with and criticize it. Find the assumptions. Let's say you read an article in the newspaper and you're like, oh, I'm glad they wrote about this issue. Look back at that article, even if you agree with 100% of it. And in each sentence, try to find the assumption that the sentence is making. So, an example is we were just coming back from Texas. So, it's mama and kid, and then mommy and other kid. And so we sit two by two, and the younger kid sits in the row behind because they kick the seat, so that they'll only
Oh,
kick us,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, I know that
So,
life.
the
I know
person they're
that life
bothering is only
well.
gonna be us. So that's how we do
Mhm.
it. So, anyway, number 2 is not kicking number 1's seat, but number 1 feels something. So she turns around and she goes, "Whoever's kicking my seat, can you please stop?" And I said, "Hey, you know what? No one happened to be kicking your seat. So I wonder if the better question is somebody kicking my seat?" So the sentence started with an assumption. I assume somebody's kicking my seat because I feel something. And now I'm going to lash out and be like, "Stop it." And that's how you find the assumption in a question. Like there's always a presumption. I mean, in any sentence, a question, a sentence, and an exclamation, there's always an assumption in there. Maybe the assumption is that you understand the word in the sentence, or maybe it's built off of some another assumption that is carrying you through the story. But find that assumption and challenge it, and then question like, how could it be said differently? How could it be said more equally, equitably? I find I do this exercise every time have to stop reading newspapers because I that's all I do. Like you have no basis of knowledge
Mhm.
to writing the sentence, but you can see like the bias in articles so often. And so take any New York Times, Washington Post, take any mainstream article and start like just with a pencil or whatever your tablet, just start marking like where the assumptions are. And that starts building your capacity to detect bias and starts building your critical thinking skills.
Mhm.
You
I
have to
love
agree
that,
with
I
the
love
article
that.
though. It can't be something you disagree with because then the assumptions are obvious. So it's something you like.
Yeah. Okay. So something you like, and yeah, and asking those questions, thinking about what the assumptions are. Yeah, can this be said differently? I love that. That was a whole class right there. I also liked how you said that, and I'm trying to pull it back up in the way that you did, but something like, if you think back over the course of your life, you'll be able to, and I'm paraphrasing because you said it much better, but you'll
Yeah,
be able to see or to find how those moments led you to what you're
absolutely.
doing. So you'll be able to see. And kind of how like how you laid out even in your storytelling. You started, when you were young and you kind of took us along. Appreciate that. Because when you
Yeah.
look back, you'll be able to see how those moments led you to where you are.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not a one off. It's not by accident. You're not spontaneously just starting. You've been building up to this moment, and now's the right time.
Hmm. That was beautifully said. That was beautifully said. That's gonna be. Yeah. I don't know. That's gonna be a clip or something. That's gonna be something. I appreciate you sharing that. So this last piece here, or we're close to the last piece here. I have three finish the statement prompts. So it's like it's not like a game. I wouldn't describe it as that, but it's just sort of a different thing that I'm doing here. So I have three finish the statement prompts. I'll say the prompt, and you just say whatever comes to your mind. And it's just a snapshot of where your thinking is in this moment. Like I ask you these questions 6 months, 2 years from now, it might be different, but just an opportunity to see what you might say. And for folks also to think about what their answers are too. So finish the statement. True social justice is possible when.
True social justice is possible when you're able to take accountability for the things you still feel a little shame for. It all
Mm.
starts with us. Not taking too much accountability, just where your lane is and for that
Mhm.
segment. But if there's a little bit of shame and it comes up even in like, your in friendships or relationships, like, yeah, okay, I know that offended you, but I really didn't mean it that way. Or yeah, I said that because that's not a taking, so that's not accountability. That's not
That's
kindness
not.
or love towards a person who was vulnerable to tell you, like, hey, that hurt my feelings. So
Yeah.
true social justice starts with you and your loved ones, your friends, or your chosen family, whoever you love and you've chosen to be in their lives. It starts with them.
Hmm. My approach to social justice is shaped by.
My approach to social justice is shaped by the worst things I've seen in my life and experienced in my life, and knowing that I never want to go back there or be part of that. It's my inspiration to make things better.
Last one. Understanding and sharing our social justice origin stories is important because.
That's easy. Sharing our social justice origin stories is important to show others that all of this is possible for us to take a part in it. There's nothing special about us. It's just a
Mhm.
choice you make. And the more you hear from other people, the more you're like, oh, I'm kind of like that person. Or that interview really spoke to me because their approach is kind of like mine. And the more you hear of the diversity of people that are in social justice, the more likely you are to get involved. So
Thank
thank you,
you.
Rolando. This is like such an important project because it reaches so many people. And once you can see yourself in it, then there's like no stopping you. It's wonderful. It's so liberating. There's so many excuses and obstacles we put up by ourselves that we don't realize. And then you watch these interviews and you're like, oh, I can do it too. There is nothing stopping me. And I want to be
Mhm.
like them. Whoever, of all the people that you've interviewed, all of them are, inspirations, people to admire, and people who had their own struggles in approaching this work. So it's all so relatable. So thank you to you for making this all
Yeah.
happen.
I do hope that this storytelling will outlast us all. And for future generations who come across this recording, is there any wisdom you'd like to pass on to them, or what would you want them to know?
We all worked really hard. We all did our best. And I'm sorry the world is in the state it's in. There were people who tried their best, and we love you and keep fighting. We did it through so much tragic horror, and you can do it too.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. That is Pooja Kothari. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for answering the call to come out and share your social justice origin stories and then also learning about boundless awareness too. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This has been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you. I'm so happy we met after all these years. You don't know, but I know. It
Same,
was years
same.
for me. Yeah.
And like I said in the beginning, y'all, this is a good example. Just put your thoughts out there, put your work out there, your projects, your ideas, and you will find connection. They resonate with you, they need to. And then you'll be 2 and 3 and 4, and it'll just keep going from there. So you'll find your community. Just put it out there.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and subscribe to Social Justice Origin Stories wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch video episodes on YouTube at Social Justice Origin Stories, and I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Video episodes are also available on the project website, socialjusticeoriginstories.com. I'd love to hear about how you're engaging with the stories. Share your thoughts at socialjusticeoriginstories.com/contact or by emailing stories@socialjusticeoriginstories.com. To support the work of Social Justice Origin Stories, consider becoming a monthly patron. Your contributions will help keep this research going and support its mission. Visit patreon.com/socialjusticeoriginstories to learn more and to make a contribution. Again, that's patreon.com/socialjusticeoriginstories. You can start or stop anytime. Social Justice Origin Stories is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Rolando Thompkins-Jones. Many thanks to our storyteller this week and the many storytellers who have contributed to this project. And thank you for joining me this week. Take care.